In this video, we're going to discuss some tools and tips for new dungeon masters. Hello and welcome to Attacks of Opportunity. I'm your host, John Sprunk. Today we're going to talk directly to new dungeon masters. Although more experienced DMs might also gain some valuable insights from this video. So I put a question up on a few different D&D Facebook groups about the anxieties and concerns faced by new dungeon masters, and got a lot of replies. I'm going to try to address as many as I can in this video, and hopefully I'm answering your question too. Now, I've been a dungeon master for more than 40 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've learned a great deal, and I'm here to share some of my insights with you about what it takes to be a good DM, especially when you're first starting out. A lot of anxiety at that time, I remember. I played back in the basic days, basic D&D, and I guess maybe I was too young to be anxious about it. It was just so much fun for me that I never got really butterflies playing it, but I do see how someone approaching the game today could feel some anxiety. There's so much D&D now that's in the mainstream all around us, and so many examples of some great play that watching that stuff, you might start to think, can I even match up? So we're going to talk about all that stuff today. Let's start with the very most basic term possible. What is a dungeon master? In a nutshell, you are running the game. You are the umpire, the referee, the party host. If there's a dispute about a rule, you make the final call and all that. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of fun, of course. I think it's my favorite role by far to play in D&D. But a lot of new DMs are very anxious about this. How can they possibly memorize all these rules? At first, you can't. It's impossible, especially if you're playing 5th edition. There's a lot of rules in there, and I don't remember them all, to tell you the truth, all the time. Um, but you work at it. It takes practice. And as you're DMing, you're going to see the same situations crop up again and again. And so the rules will become more and more familiar, especially with combat. That's usually where people feel like the rules are most crunchy. And there's many, many rules in D&D about the combat. But as each combat goes by, each encounter, you're going to see the same scenario play out again and again. You're going to have the same rules being enforced over and over again, and that will reinforce for you and your players how it's supposed to go. But you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. You're going to make a bad call once in a while. One of the most important lessons to learn for a DM is just to keep things moving. It is tempting sometimes to want to stop the action and open up the rule books and pour into it and get the exact rule to get it right in the moment. And I've felt that, and I've tried to do that. But until you're very familiar with the rule book, it can take too much time to delve in there and find the rule you're looking for, especially if it's a rule not used very often. It's hard to find. You're slowing the game down. Everybody else is just watching you look through a book. It's not very exciting. Far better to make an incorrect ruling at the table and keep action moving than it is to stop the action for 10 minutes to find the right rule. Remember that the rules are also, they're guidelines. There's something you and your players should agree upon, and you should try to play them by the rules that you all agree upon. But I think all the players would appreciate it if you just kept the action going. And then after the session, that's when you can go back in the books, look up the rules you were unclear about. I made a mistake, guys. That should have gone that way instead. But you know what? You had fun. It's okay. Now for next time, you'll know better and you'll move on from there. Okay? So that's the first tip I have for you. Keep the action moving. And the DM is also the main storyteller in the game. I say main because D&D is a collaborative game. It is a game that you and the players play together. You're both telling the story together. What usually happens is you, the DM, will set the stage for a new session. Like, hey, You sit down. All right, guys, as you recall, last time we stopped, you were in the tavern, the Green Griffin in this village, and you were talking about what to do next. You had a few clues you were thinking about following up. Great. You set the stage. Now it's the player's turn. They're going to do some storytelling too. They're going to talk amongst themselves, figure out what they want to do next. They decide the actions, and the dungeon master decides the consequences of those actions. Uh, it sounds a little daunting at first, but it's a great conversation. It's a back and forth. You know, they say what they want to do. You tell them what the consequences and reactions of the world are, and then back and forth all the way through the session. Sometimes you interject with an outside influence. So they're deciding what to do, and then boom, you have some bad guys break in the front door and attack, or something like that, or a dragon flies over the village, and everybody goes outside to see it. You know, things like that will happen, and they will react to what happened, what you put out there, and then the back and forth keeps on going. When it works, when you have a group that you're practiced with, it's almost like breathing. It's so easy, that back and forth conversation, and it's a magical experience. So, and you'll feel it. You'll be like, it just seems so effortless all of a sudden. So that's what we're trying to go for. But it takes practice, and it takes a little bit of getting over your stage fright. But we'll get into that also. But one important thing to keep in mind is that the DM is in charge of the game. Now, like I said, you're telling a story together, but the D&D is the umpire. Just like at a sporting event, the players of the football game or soccer, whatever it is, they have agreed to abide by the referee's rulings. That is the power they give to the ref. And the players at D&D give you, the DM, the same power. So if there's a dispute, you're the one to make the final call. The players are expected to go along with that, even if they know they read the rule book last night, the player's handbook, and they know for sure that you're doing it wrong. In that instance, sure, you could ask them for help if they've been playing for longer than you, sure, no problem with that. But if you make a ruling at the table, you should expect it to stand in that moment until you correct it, and they should expect that too as your players. That respect does go back and forth. Um, a lot of new DMs have a question of, well, what happens if a player disagrees with me at the table and doesn't want to abide by my ruling? What do I do? Okay, I see that being an anxiety, but it's just like any other game you play with your friends, a card game, a board game. You know, what happens if there's a dispute? In this case, it's a little bit different because you are the umpire, not another player. I get that. Um, in my experience, this is actually a pretty rare occurrence. Um, Usually, once you have a group of players that play together for a little while, everybody knows what's going on. They know the score. They know that you're the DM, you're in charge, and they're going to abide by that. Um, Once in a while, they might challenge it in a friendly way and say, "Hey, I think this is incorrect," and you can have a quick discussion about the rule, and maybe you'll take their advice, maybe you won't. But there's no real animosity about that. Um, it's extremely rare, in my experience, that a player comes to the table wanting to make the DM's life a living hell. Like, I'm gonna just be a contrarian just to be one, and every ruling I'm going to challenge. If you ever have something like that, where a player is clearly there not to play the game or have fun, but to mess with you or other players, just nip that in the bud, really right away. Say, hey, we're not doing that. This is how it's going to go. If you don't like that, you can invite them to leave. You have that authority. It's your game, it's your table. If they can't abide by the agreement to follow your lead, then they should leave. Um, I would afterwards, of course, approach that player, and say, what happened? Why was this going on? What were you going through that made you do this? Now, maybe that person it was a personality conflict. Maybe they don't like another player and they couldn't hide it. Just came out in an inappropriate way. Maybe it's a problem with you. That could happen too, sure, but have those conversations outside the session. You don't want to bog down your game with a big discussion about who did what and why and all that finger pointing. Just, if a person can't get along with everybody else, I just suggest ask them to leave. If they're a good friend of yours, you'll talk to them afterwards, you'll iron it out, you'll figure out a solution. Um, but you don't want to derail a game with all the other players over one person's problems. It's just not fair to the group. It's inappropriate for that time and place. I saw a lot of questions from new DMs about combat balance. How do you make an encounter, a combat encounter, challenging for the party, but not overrun them and kill them all off? I tell you, it's not an exact science. It's more of an art form. There are tools you can use to guide yourself, but a lot of it is experience. In the monster manual, the monsters have a challenge rating, a number which loosely ties to the level of party that they'd be a good challenge for. It also depends on your players. Inexperienced players will have a tougher time in combat just because devising the tactics will be new to them. They're not optimized to be these brutal killing machines yet. My group of players, most of them have been playing for 10, 20, 30 years. So they know the game really well and they know how to run combat. So a challenge rating monster of a 5, my character probably could handle it level 1 or 2, just because they're so good at finding the weaknesses, working together. So part of that is knowing your group, how experienced they are in combat, about what to throw at them. But I also find that combat balance happens to me during the combat, not just when I'm planning it. And what I mean is D&D combat is very fluid. A few dice rolls one way or the other can turn the tide very quickly. So you could have your party against a group of monsters, right? Or maybe against one monster. Um, a couple crits in a row by one side or the other can be massive. The party might drop your dragon in 1 round or 2 rounds, and you're like, what the heck went on? Well, they got a lot of great rolls. The fighter swung twice, critted on both of them. That's great. Rolled maximum damage. The wizard got off a fireball. The dragon missed a saving throw. The wizard rolled almost maximum damage on that. Just things that are quirky results of the dice, and the dragon goes down much faster than you thought it was going to. Or the opposite, your party's fighting some goblins or kobolds. Think something you think that should be an easy fight for them is pretty much just a nuisance fight. But the goblins keep rolling crits, and the party keeps missing over and over again. Well, now the fighter goes down, then the cleric goes down. All of a sudden, the kobolds are on the verge of wiping your party. You're like, how did this even happen? So, um, what I always do is keep an open mind during the combat. What I'm trying to do is give an experience, right? Like a thrill ride, a roller coaster for my players. And I want it to have some big hills and some valleys. It should be fast and quick and exciting. And so I'm balancing the combat in real time with them. So if one side starts to get real lucky and the challenge is not there for the party, I will subtly and behind the screen increase the monster's chances a bit. So, all right, here's a good example. The party is fighting a mini boss in my campaign. This is supposed to be a relatively important villain, a lieutenant of the big boss, right? It's supposed to be exciting and supposed to be thrilling and last hopefully at least 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. The party should feel at certain points like they're on the ropes. They could lose this fight. It should be like a good movie battle, right? Well, you get in there and the party just starts to mow through your mini boss like nothing. And you're like, oh my gosh, this might be over in 1 round or 2 rounds. It's not even thrilling anymore. The party is just, they're cackling with glee. They're loving it because this lieutenant is just such an easy cakewalk for them. Okay, you can let that go. There's nothing wrong with letting them have their moment of easy triumph. But I do find that the victories they have to work towards to get, they gotta sweat a little bit, are the ones they remember afterwards, the ones they really were excited about. Everybody thinks that they want this cakewalk where your hero just swings their sword 2 or 3 times and entire kingdoms fall down, dead. It sounds fun for a moment, but in reality, those easy victories are forgettable. So what I try and do is if I have an important fight going on and the party is just going through it way too easy, I will make it more difficult on the fly. So maybe my lieutenant boss, my mini boss, just snaps their fingers, and all of a sudden, instantly, a bunch of new minions, reinforcements pour in from the doorway behind the party and attack. Now it just got more interesting. Now a fight versus one monster became a fight versus 20 monsters, and they got to sweat a little bit more. They got to work towards that victory. Um, Sometimes for if I'm fighting a single monster for the party, and they're just plowing through it. It happens sometimes. Maybe I'll bump those hit points for the monster up a little bit. You know, maybe it had 100 hit points. Maybe I'll add 25 to 30 more, just to make the combat last another round. Give the monster a chance to use its big ability, its breath weapon, or whatever it is, a powerful spell it has waiting, um, just to make the party know that they have to work a little bit for it. Again, these things are invisible. I'm sure my players, even experienced as they are, couldn't tell you which fights I did it on, which fights I didn't do that on, because I don't tip my hand to them. I don't say, "Oh my gosh, this is so easy. Let's have some more minions show up." I don't tell them that. So some fights have that built in already, and they don't know one way or the other. And that's the joy of being a DM. You're directing a play, but in real time. It's very exciting. But the opposite should happen too. You know, if the party is just dropping like flies, I might have the boss miss a couple times on their attack rolls. Maybe they fail a saving throw that they should have made, um, just to give the party some breathing room. Now, I'm not afraid to kill my players off. They will tell you, my characters, that is, not the players. My players will tell you that I can be a little grim sometimes. I am a stickler for if you make bad decisions and your character dies, then that's how it's going to be. I don't give many do-overs, that's for sure. But I'm not trying to kill them on every single encounter. Obviously, campaigns wouldn't last very long if I did. So anyway, just it's something you get a feel for over time. There's no set answer about how to do it. It's simply the more combats you run, the more experience you get, the more you start to feel when combats are becoming too easy or too tough, and you can make micro adjustments on the fly. That's all part of good DMing. Now we'll take a moment to mention that some dungeon masters are sticklers for the rules as written, and they think that fudging dice rolls is wrong. Not just wrong, but like evil. If you're one of them, great. Play your game the way you want to, that's fine. I'm not arguing against that. That's your table, do what you want. But here's my counterpoint. You're telling a story with your players, right? Well, it's not really heroic to have your heroes die at first level to a couple of goblins simply because the goblins got like 3 crit rolls in a row and your party failed a saving throw or something, and just they start wiping. That's not heroic. And obviously, if you spend a lot of time building a campaign, it can be a little disappointing for you to have them die in the first session to a monster you really thought would be trivial just from some bad luck. So I'm just saying, keep that in mind, that the storytelling does go both ways. Now, sometimes in a story, it's really appropriate that a character could die because it has a lot of meaning. I'm thinking like Dragonlance when Sturm Brightblade dies. Such a gripping thing. Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, the first book, Fellowship, when he falls to the Balrog, apparently, appears to. Um, these were heavily emotional scenes, and you can have those and you should have them in your campaign because your players will love them even though they hate them in the moment. They'll love them in memory, and they'll talk about them for years to come. I'm not saying never let your characters have bad things happen to them, but you understand Gandalf didn't fall to the first goblin arrow in Moria. You know, it was a dramatic fight against an overwhelming enemy that felled him, and that is the kind of death that your players can take joy in. Even if it's their character, they can say, "That sucked that I died, but man, what a way to go! That's heroic. That's what a hero does." So those moments, you should look for them, and if the dice rolls are going bad at a climactic moment, then I'm saying maybe let them go. Maybe let the party suffer some losses, um, especially because D&D is a game where at higher levels you can bring these characters back to life. But even if you don't allow that, uh, these dramatic moments can really, really make a campaign shine. Um, just keep that in mind. Okay, next I want to talk about creating NPCs, non-player characters. This is a big part of the DM's job. Remember, you set the stage, so you are the director and the stage designer and the playwright to some degree, as far as character creation for non-player characters. Anybody that your characters are not playing, you play. So, for example, you're going to be playing the parts of tavern keepers and shopkeepers and old crones and mysterious wizards and anybody they encounter on in their travels. Uh, so, how do you create them and how do you make them memorable? The quick answer is they don't have to all be memorable. You know, if your party just stops in a local shop to buy some more rations, maybe a new dagger, you don't have to have a big to do about this. Maybe just have the shopkeep, you know, say, how can I help you? They do their shopping and they go on their way. The group probably doesn't want to spend 4 hours role playing a shopping trip. Usually. There are exceptions to that rule. But for most of your nameless NPCs out there, servants, shopkeeps, people on the road that they don't talk to that much, you don't need much for them. You know, not even stats. I don't stat out every NPC the party talks to, only the ones they're going to fight, potentially. Um, However, anybody that they're going to have a lot of interactions with. Let's say that in the local town that they're in, there's a sage who lives there and is going to be a source of information throughout an adventure. You know, the PCs will go back to this person over and over again to get clues, to discuss what they're finding, to get new quests, that kind of thing. That person, of course, should have a bit more to them. A name would be nice. Some notes about their personality, any quirks that go on. I also put in notes about their voice because um, I'm not a professional voice actor, of course, but I do voices for my NPCs, at least the important ones. So I'll have a note like, you know, this woman has a low, screechy voice, maybe, or high pitched, or they chuckle a lot because everything's funny to them, or they have a deep baritone voice, or you know, whatever it is. I'll make a note and try and stick to it. Also, a little bit of backstory. If it's an NPC that has quest for the for the players to do, you know, why? Why are they doing this? So, you know, maybe the witch who sells herbs in a certain village is actually a high-level cleric who is here because she suspects an evil cult is operating in the area, and she's keeping an eye on things secretively. The players might meet her, and then she can give them information, even some quests, because she wants to use them as eyes and ears. She sends them out to go track down the cult hideout and stuff and fight them, that kind of stuff. So for that kind of person, I will have a lot of detail because she's gonna have a real personality because the players should see her as a real person, and that's your goal with important NPCs, to make them seem every bit as real as a person they might meet in real life. Um, it sounds difficult. It's just, I think, a practice and a bit of it's play acting, right? So once you start to get used to the fact, you know, you do a little voice, you give some information, and you don't have to have a million pages of notes on this person. Have a few things written down and don't be afraid to add stuff as you go. A lot of times I'll have like a local source of information. I'll have a few notes about them. But as the adventure goes on, the players keep going back to this person over and over and having these discussions with them. I'll make up details on the fly about this person and I'll make notes. So maybe I didn't know that this NPC, their mother died, the cult killed their mother. That's why they're so much against the cult, right? It's a good motivation for them. I didn't know that ahead of time, but the players are talking to this person and it just comes out. I just make it up on the fly and I'm like, oh yeah, the one PC says, so why are you such a big opponent of this cult? Anyway, and the NPC goes, they killed my mother. Boom, I didn't know that. But now I have a new background detail. Those kind of things are awesome on the fly. don't be afraid to add them. Again, it's all play acting, it's all your imagination, and go for it. Another common question I saw asked was, how do you know how much material to prepare for a session? That is a great question and doesn't have an exact answer to it. First of all, because all groups are different. You know, the amount of material that I prepare for my group for a single session might take another group 2 or even 3 sessions to get through, or half as long, half a session. It just depends. I think that some groups naturally meander a bit more and they want to kind of take their time. Other groups are like all business. They want to just accomplish stuff every moment they're playing. So you got to kind of get a feel for your players. I'll tell you that I'm a bit of an over planner. So, I mean, I will create hours and hours and hours of material at a time. And I like to get ahead of my group. So when I'm starting a new campaign, I'll usually create maybe 8 to 10 sessions of material ahead of time before we start playing a new campaign. That way, I know that they won't catch up, because my fear, of course, is that they catch up to what I've written, and now I don't have material for them, which of course is a common fear of all DMs. But even I understand that it's really not a true concern, because even if they get to all the end of my material, I can be like, make it up as we go along. Yeah, it's more fun sometimes to be working through your plan material because you have the stat blocks ready. It all makes logical sense. And sometimes when you just do it on the fly, you can feel a little chaotic. It's also kind of thrilling to take your party through an adventure that you didn't even have planned. Um, the only difficulty I foresee right now in the age of COVID is I use Roll20 for adventures. And so I make the maps ahead of time, of course, for different dungeons and places they're going to go and towns and cities. I can't make detailed maps on Roll20 on the fly. It takes too much time. So the players have to understand that if they go beyond what I have prepared, they're going to see a blank map with their tokens on it, and I'll just be using the pen to draw stuff in on the fly. But they're okay with that because it's all imagination. As long as we have fun together, no one gets bent out of shape about that. So don't fear that you're going to have too little material. Even if you do run out, just make up stuff as you go, and you can do that. So when your campaign is beginning, you don't really need a ton of material. You might think you do, but you don't. Um, Here's some examples. Have a local map. Let's say your campaign starts in a small village, like a lot of them do. Your players are villagers. Great. So have a map of the village. Not super detailed, just show where the buildings are, the major stuff. Where's the blacksmith? Where's the inn, the tavern? Where can they buy this or that? That's the stuff they want to know about anyway. And then have a regional map, the land around the village. Um, Maybe 10 miles or so, 20 miles across is plenty for now. And then you're going to have some landmarks in that region, anything. I like to have old ruins in all my campaigns, so I'll put some ruins over here, some ruins over there. There'll be a little bit of history about them. Maybe they belong to a fallen kingdom from long ago. Maybe one of them is the tower of a wizard who lived there a century ago, and then the wizard died. The tower fell into disrepair, and now it's just crumbling. Great landmark. There could be a dungeon in there. Who knows? And then I usually have one adventure set up at the beginning. Maybe there's a nearby system of caves where some goblins have taken over, and they use those caves as their headquarters, and they launch raids against the village from there. So maybe the campaign starts with a goblin attack on the player's village. They have to help defeat the attack. The goblins retreat, and then the players are the people who are tapped or volunteer to track them down to their lair and put an end to them. Extremely simple, basic starting adventure, but it gets the thing starting for your characters. I also find that the intro adventure, it's not what they do that's important so much, it's that they're doing something heroic, that they're out there facing dangers, getting some treasure, learning how to play their class, their character. Um, If you're starting at first level and your players aren't super experienced, you know, they're going to need a session or two under their belt to learn how this class works. And that's great. So the intro adventure shouldn't be super challenging, that kind of stuff. Another common question was, what happens when the party goes off the beaten path? Okay, you've taken time before the campaign to plan the local area and an adventure to start it off, right? And right off the bat, the party goes off the rails in a different direction you didn't even imagine. They don't want to talk about goblins or caves. All they want to do is journey right away to the kingdom's capital to become, I don't know what, guards, king's guards, who knows? Um, and you're like, oh, darn, I've got like 2 or 3 sessions planned for you guys to get your feet wet here in the village, and you just want to leave Dodge right away and go to Capital City. What do? Well, I'll tell you what not to do. What you don't do is just tell them no. Nope, you can't do it. Why not? Because last night there was a new mountain range appeared right in your path, so you can't get to the capital city because it's cut off. Really? No. Or a chasm opened up right in the road. It's impassable. So sorry, you guys stay here and do my adventure. This is called railroading. And players hate it, and for good reason. A big part of the fun of Dungeons and Dragons for your players is they get to pretend to be heroes, right? And do things they couldn't normally do. If you take their choices away from them, then they're just puppets and they're not playing with you. You're playing and they're watching pretty much. So don't railroad them into things. Yes, you prepared material. Yes, it would be a shame if you couldn't use it, but it's not the end of the world, especially if they're having fun. If they're not excited about chasing down goblins in a cave, and they're really excited about going to the capital city and trying to meet the king and become guard and whatever. That's their goal in life. Well, indulge them. This is their game too. And if they're having fun, that's what you want, right? You want them smiling and happy and excited about playing. So on the fly, you're going to have to devise what happens. Now, the good news is, if you're playing a session of 3 or 4 hours, you could spend that much time just on the journey alone. Let's say the village is 100 miles from the capital. Okay, that would take a person on foot, what, 5 days or more? You can have some encounters on the way. Maybe those goblins follow the party and try to like waylay them on the road, like, and rob them. You still have your goblin attack, they couldn't escape that. But this time, instead of going to the caves afterwards, they keep on going. Great. Maybe they encounter some bandits. Um, maybe they come to a river, and there was a bridge there, a very old stone bridge the dwarves made a long time ago. Oops, it's collapsed. No one knew it because no one's been this way in a while. Um, that's not railroading. It's an obstacle, right? It's not impassable. It's just something that the party has to think about. How do they get past it? Do we chop down some trees and make a raft and try and float across it? Do we try and repair the bridge? Do we try and swim it? Is there a spell that one of the casters might have to make things easier? And while they're trying to cross, what happens? Maybe there is a bridge troll that lives in the river underneath the bridge. So when they're trying to cross over, it attacks. Who knows? Use your imagination. And like I said, you can take the entire rest of that session just on the journey, and then you can end it with, you're getting ready to wrap up, and just as they top the crest of a hill, they see ahead of them the shining towers of the capital. We're going to stop there for tonight. Great. That was a great thing. They got to go. They're moving towards their goal. They're having fun. You didn't have to like create massive, intricate maps, just a road and some encounters along the way, some interesting stuff they can see, and then boom. Now, before the next session, you can hurry up and try to devise what that capital city is. You get my point. You're slowing down time a little bit until you have the session's over so that you can now next time have some stuff prepared for them. And now that you know their goal, that makes your job a lot easier. As a DM, talk to your players, find out what they want to do, because when they tell you that their characters' motivations and goals, now you can devise things that play into that or play against it. Sometimes it's even more fun to challenge them and make those goals seem unattainable. Those are the challenges they're going to crave. But the thing to remember is this is all play acting, okay? No one expects you to pull the Lord of the Rings out of your ass on the fly. If they do expect that, they should try DMing themselves and see how easy that is. Um, but you can use all kinds of popular culture references, movies, books, TV shows for inspiration for stuff on the fly. Maybe you have been watching Game of Thrones or The Witcher, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a great battle in there. Okay, this monster attacks you guys, or something happens, or whatever you can pull from these materials to make your job a little easier. They always say that. Good writers borrow and great writers steal from each other. So it's quite all right. You're not copywriting this stuff anyway. But go with your gut, use your imagination, and I guarantee once you get past the anxiety of creating stuff on the fly, you'll be amazed at what you can come up with without any preparation at all. And sometimes you'll stumble on an adventure idea that's much better than what you had planned in the first place. It happens all the time. Sometimes inspiration just breeds innovation, that thrill in real time to come up with some interesting idea can really trigger some great discoveries. So don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, and then when you have time afterwards, start preparing for next session and see where that takes you. What about plot? Okay, plot is a name for story, really, and it's can sound complex. I know I'm a writer, and a lot of writers will discuss plot as if it's some lofty thing that mere peons can't comprehend or grasp or emulate in any way. That's all rubbish. Every human being tells stories, so we all are involved with plot making. So my first advice is when you're new to start off relatively simple. Um, the party goes to a town that is being plagued by an evil cult. They fend off an attack by the cultists. They track down the cult to its lair. They fight through some lower level minions. They finally corner and confront the leader, defeat that person, hopefully, maybe get some treasure, only to discover that the mayor of the town, his sister, is the real, true, hidden cult leader behind the scenes. Um, Something like that. Not super complex. Doesn't take a whole lot of time to formulate. And that simple plot line right there could take a group 1 or 2 sessions or 10 sessions, depending on how much you flesh it out. You can add subplots. Those are little stories that sort of branch off from the main thing. Maybe as they are investigating the cult's hideout, the lair, um, they get an information source from a young woman. Turns out her brother might be in the cult, and she wants to hire the party to rescue him. She feels he's being brainwashed. That's a subplot, and it adds some subtlety to the campaign because now the party can't just go in there and like just kill everybody on sight in the cult's lair, because one of those persons they're supposed to rescue against their will. So they got to find out who this person is. Maybe they changed their mind from an all-out assault to some kind of infiltration, something sneaky, and try and find this person first, get them out, and then come back for the heavy assault. All kinds of things can happen just from adding that simple wrinkle to the campaign, and your party's going to love it because it's going to give them chance to problem solve. I mean, combat is a way of solving problems, but you know, the party will crave from time to time different ways to handle their opponents. So that's one way of doing it. You can add red herrings, which are just false clues. Maybe they talk to an informant and get some bad information. Maybe they actually are told the cult is lairing in an old warehouse down by the docks. So they go there ready to break down the door and have a big fight. Aha, it's a trap. It's not the real hideout, but it's a booby-trapped place that the cult sets up to trap investigators. Okay, cool. That's a little sub-adventure the party can have before they get to the main lair. Very cool stuff. Whatever you can think of to keep the party guessing, to keep them interested. Um, People ask about what if my players get bored. Boredom usually sets in when the players are not mentally challenged. Um, if a campaign is just too simple and you're telling them all the information up front, there's no guessing, there's no subplots, there's no wrinkles, there's no drama going on. It's pretty much, okay, guys, here's the dungeon of the day. You're starting in the first room. It's going to be very linear. It's just 5 rooms right in a row. You're going to fight a monster in each room, and then fight the boss at the end. I mean, that could be fun once in a while, but I mean, if that's every session for your group, they're going to get bored of it. They crave some challenge, they crave something new, something they haven't seen before. So, you can learn to read your players, and if you sense boredom, you know that things have gotten stale, and you can take steps to fix that. It's important to remember that you as the DM have a great deal of control on the pace of the game. Now, of course, the party can drag its feet. Let's say you have a murder mystery set up, and there's clues scattered around a certain town, and the party just takes its time investigating. They want to track down every possible lead, even the ones that are trivial or obviously aren't going to lead anywhere. They still want to be very, judicious and track down. It might take them a couple sessions to solve a mystery that you thought they could do in an hour or two. Okay, that happens. But also, as far as the pace of the game, you have a lot of control. First of all, you can give a clue that catapults them towards the end quicker if they're dragging their feet. Um, Also, if they're traveling, you can either, like I told you before, you can space that out. You can have a journey from a village to the capital take 4 hours of game time with encounters and landmarks in between, or you can simply snap your fingers and say, okay, 5 days later, you show up in capital city. What do you want to do? It can be instantaneous. That's the power of storytelling to control the flow of time. And you'll get a feel for that as well. It just matters what you're doing in your campaign. If the party is ready for the next stage of the adventure, you don't have to drag your feet, getting them there if you don't want to. You can sort of fast forward. A lot of the older module series that TSR and Wizards put out, one module would happen and then it would end, and the next module will be like in a different part of the world, and it would just say something, like, okay, you journeyed to this other part of the world to start again in this new adventure, and they would just fast track it. You can do that too. Whatever you think is best for the pacing. And it becomes a matter of experience. Some campaigns, the journey to a location is most of the campaign. I mean, that's the adventure, getting there. Other times, getting there is just trivial and I fast track it. So it just depends on what you want to do, where the action is, and you'll learn that as you go along. And if all else fails, if things are getting a bit stale or boring, and you can tell your players are not paying attention as much as they were, insert action. Putting their characters in jeopardy will get their attention right away. So if they're just, let's say they're investigating a murder mystery in a town and there's no immediate danger to them. They're investigators and the killer is out there, but he's not targeting the player characters. He's targeting prostitutes like Jack the Ripper, okay? They might get a little bored after an hour or so of tracking down clues. Why? Because there isn't much action. It's a bunch of just talking and walking and interviewing people. And while that can be fun for a little bit, it can become a little stale at a gaming table. So what you do is you inject some action. Maybe while they're going to investigate a snitch, they turn up and the snitch is dead, been murdered by the killer. And there's a trap left behind or a monster left behind, something for the party to interact with that's dangerous. That will get them interested again, get their blood pumping. Anything that puts them in jeopardy is a good thing to do. Um, Splitting the party up can be thrilling. I wouldn't do it all the time, but let's say you're in a dungeon and the party's just going through it room by room, very methodical. That can happen sometimes. Your players can become so good at clearing dungeons. It's like a SEAL team, kick the door in, clear, 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 next room, let's go. Um, you can throw some wrinkles in there. Maybe a teleportation trap will teleport the first two PCs to a different level of the dungeon and just them. So now the party's split up. Now they're more anxious because their group is each smaller, and any monster they encounter might kill them, whereas the whole group could probably handle it, pretty easily. So don't do it all the time because it's time consuming to split the group up, but it is a technique you can use once in a while to up the ante and make things more thrilling, more scary for the player characters. So devising great D&D sessions isn't all that complex. It might not be easy, but it's not complex. Um, don't expect to pull out a masterpiece your first couple times out of the gate. Um, go easy on yourself. When I first started back in the late 70s, because I'm old, um, often what I did was I would have a pre-published module from TSR, and I would run it as it was written. I'd take my players through the module. Um, uh, Quest to the Unknown, Keep on the Borderlands, the Slave Lord modules, all that stuff. Great material. We would just run it as it was written. But as time went on, I started to discover that I could make improvements, that the modules were really fun still, but I saw places where I could make it even better. So I would start to make notes in the margins or even rewrite sections of the module to make it better. And this just is a process that I think almost every DM goes through. First you crawl, then you walk, and then you can run. So eventually I started writing campaigns from scratch entirely on my own. And I love it. I love the planning. I love setting up, making the maps for myself. But I still buy a lot of published campaign material and I borrow from it. I have a campaign that I'm making right now that I'm actually borrowing from a campaign of modules from TSR from back in the 80s that I haven't played in a long, long time, but I love these modules, and I'm gonna I'm rewriting them from scratch, which is awesome and fun and thrilling and challenging, and putting my own stamp on a classic adventure and having it fit inside my campaign world. So that's something else you'll be doing eventually too. So don't be afraid if you're using a published module to make some changes, because remember, the whole goal is to have fun. If you see let's say you're running Curse of Strahd, a really excellent 5th edition adventure, and you're like, oh, this is really great, except that there's one mini dungeon that you read it, it's kind of stale to you. It's not really exciting. It's kind of the same old, same old. You have a great idea to spice it up. You're going to add a different kind of monster and some traps, and you just have some great ideas. Throw them in there. That's how you do it. You experiment and you figure out what works, what doesn't work. And the more you personalize or customize the adventures, the more fun you're going to have, I believe. And also, your players will really get more of a thrill out of it because the published material is, remember, it's published for everybody, for a general audience. You can customize that module, though, specifically towards your players, towards their party. For example, let's say you have a party that has a cleric and 2 paladins in it, and they all worship the same god. They're very religious and pious. Wonderful. You could rewrite some adventures to take advantage of that, to really make a point of playing up the religion aspect that maybe wasn't there before. Or the opposite. Sometimes you have a module that kind of assumes the players are good characters, which is the default for D&D, right? But you're actually playing an evil campaign where your characters are evil. Uh, so you can rewrite the adventure to reflect that. Now, instead of trying to save the princess, they're trying to kidnap her. They're the villains, right? So you can rewrite these adventures to suit your specific party members, which is a lot of fun. I suspect a lot of Modern players see things like Critical Role, other professional Dungeons and Dragons groups, and they get the feeling that all D&D players are just these poised and polished performers. Nothing could be farther from the truth. All of these professionals, DMs at least, have been playing for probably a decade or more. Some of them are trained actors, so they have other tools to pull from to make things seem very dramatic and to memorize, big pieces of dialogue that maybe you and I don't have. My piece of advice is take it easy on yourself. Don't expect to be, a 40-year veteran, polished voice actor with 3 decades of stage, experience, and you're also a professional singer and songwriter and all of this. Come on, you know, when you're starting out, go easy on yourself. Nobody expects you to be more than what you are. It's like riding a bike. When you're first starting out, you're going to fall down. It's going to suck. And that's okay. You get back on the bike, you keep going, and you get confidence, and eventually you're popping wheelies and jumping on ramps. Okay, um, that will come to you. Comes to everybody eventually, but you have to give yourself time to learn and get experience. And there's some bumps and bruises on the way, but like I said, if you're playing with your friends, that's great because they're going to grow with you. If they're new to the game as well as players, well, they're also going to have their learning process. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do things that they wish afterwards they hadn't done. Those are the growing pains. So you guys can go through it together, and that's part of the magic too. If you're a brand new DM with a group of players that are very experienced, that could be quite daunting because they've probably seen a lot of things that DMs do, and they might have loftier expectations, but you talk about beforehand and you work it out, and you know eh, hopefully they're cool and they're like, okay, well, you're brand new, it's going to take time, we're going to help, and they work with you instead of against you. If that's not the case, then maybe find another group that has less experienced players, or maybe it's time to let somebody else DM for a while you watch and learn what they're doing while you work on your skills, and then to take over the reins at some point in the future. Those are all possibilities. But that's probably pretty rare, I'm guessing. Another common question from people is, how do you know how to run a session? How do you know what to do? Like I said, I started off running pre-published modules, so I was following along and I just learned the rhythm of how those adventures were written and played out. And then I just worked off of that. If you don't have any pre-published material, it might be a little difficult to come up with adventure ideas. Again, use movies, books for ideas. But the cardinal rule is to have fun, and that includes you. If you, the DM, are not having fun, probably the players are not going to have fun either. So, imagine the kind of adventure that you'd want to go through. Maybe you love ancient castles. It's just something about old castles you always love to visit them, to see pictures of them. Well, make an adventure, based in an old ruined castle. Great. It maybe has a dungeon beneath it. What lives there? Is it just, some goblins that moved in? Or maybe something more intelligent that has long range plans. Maybe it's actually taken over by, a necromancer who has plans to rob the graveyards around the area and build this huge army of undead, right? And your players stumble on the castle before your plans are really cemented. So they find some undead and they find a lot of laboratories where there's some experiments going on, and they confront the necromancer. Maybe they kill that person, or maybe they capture them, or maybe the villain escapes to come back some other day. But, whatever adventure you would love to go through as a player, I'll bet your players want to go through too. So work off of what you like, what you know. When it comes to your players having fun, a lot of it comes down to what we call immersion. Immersion is when the players are so invested in the game that they start to feel like they're not watching it, but they're living it as if they are the characters themselves. It's just that next level of play acting where instead of just pretending to be the part, you're becoming the part. And it's fantastic when it happens because it really, if you can get an entire party of people, 3, 4, 5 of your friends, and you all immersed together, it truly is magical. It's like you are transported to another world, going through these adventures. So that's your goal, really. That's the ultimate goal in D&D, I believe, is to immerse all the players and the DM at the same time and keep that going as long as possible. So how do you do that? Um, be colorful, be dramatic. When they go to a place, describe it with rich detail. So this castle idea, right? This ruined castle. Well, as they approach from the outside, draw a picture with words. If you're playing online, you could add a picture from the web, of a castle that looks sort of similar, or a drawing that you made maybe. But if you're using words, you're painting a picture in their imagination, and the more real you make it, the more vivid, the more they'll be immersed in the moment. Now, I will caution you that sometimes less is more. You do not want to have, they enter a room in the castle and you spend 10 minutes describing every detail down to the microscopic level. That's not fun for anybody. Describe the important things and try to vary the descriptions, try to add some smells, some sounds once in a while that will just have details that sort of stick in their mind. Um, Go back and reread some of your favorite fantasy novels to see how those writers do it. You know, Blood and Iron. um, you know, uh, we fantasy authors spend years honing the craft of describing a scene in vivid detail, but not going on so long, hopefully, that we bore the reader, right? You can borrow from that and do the exact same thing for your campaign, for your descriptions. Um, you're going to describe the scenery, the characters that they meet. If you just say, okay, you meet the king, he's sitting on a throne, that's not real descriptive, but they walk in the throne room. You can briefly describe in a sentence or two the throne room, how big it is. There's gold covering all the fixtures. It's very wealthy looking, and then the king is on his throne, and he looks like a toad. He's just got scrawny little limbs and his big bloated belly, and his face is all it's almost like it's melting. It's like he's got these jowls, and he's got like a yellow jaundiced appearance, and his eyes are sort of yellowish, and his hair is greasy. Well, that's one different kind of king than your King Arthur type, which is very regal and upright and muscular and got a very dignified look to him. Well, how you describe that ruler has a huge effect on how your characters will see them and treat them, right? So those descriptions have real impact. If you want your characters to take the ruler seriously, you describe them in a way that seems serious. If you've ever been in court, with a judge, maybe use that description because especially if you were the defendant, you're probably a little scared. Use anything you can draw from, but if you want the ruler to appear foppish or weak, have that in the description, and that will inform your players how everybody reacts to that person and how they can react to that person. And encourage your players to role play. This is an RPG after all. Now, for new players, that can be a little bit scary. It's scary to put on a role, to act in front of other people, right? And especially to maybe do a voice that's different from their own. Um, Baby steps, and for yourself as well. You're performing for the group, but it can be a little scary to like assume the role of every NPC they meet. I get that. So do it in baby steps. Do as much as you feel comfortable with, and always be pushing yourself to go a little bit farther, a little bit deeper. And that way, over time, you'll start to develop the techniques you need. Um, when they enter the tavern, try to adopt the voice of the tavern owner. You know, it's usually a brief conversation of a few seconds. It's not going to take a whole lot. There's no dialogue to memorize. Hey, what are you guys doing today? What can I do for you? Or, you know, you know, uh, close the door, it's cold outside, whatever it is, make up a voice that you think goes over. The point is not to be a voice actor. It's just to lend some atmosphere. That's all you're doing. You know what I mean? Uh, and it could be funny. Sometimes you'll do a silly voice and people laugh a little bit, but not laughing at you, laughing with you. And, it can be a good icebreaker. But things like that can really help immerse your players and perk them up a little bit. You can make an otherwise mundane encounter more memorable. It's a little bit of role playing, that's all. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And eventually it'll be secondhand. You'll always be doing that in the game. And that's when you can start to focus on other things, bigger picture things. If you're worried about not being entertaining enough or not being a good enough DM, again, relax, don't sweat it. Confidence will come with time and experience, okay? Um, Focus on the fun. If you're having fun, if your players are having fun, then you're doing it something right. Okay, everybody's going to have strengths as a DM and weaknesses. We all do. Learn to embrace your strengths and cover up your weaknesses over time, and you'll be doing that. And after all, it's a game. You focus on the friendship and the fun, and things will mostly take care of themselves for you. So that pretty much wraps it up. I think the lesson, the takeaway should be relax, learn, enjoy yourself, and the confidence will come. And when it does, this will all seem much, much easier in retrospect. I'm sure I didn't answer everybody's questions that came up on the websites, the groups I was in. If you're watching this and you had a question, I didn't get to it, I apologize. Put it in the comments below. I do read them, I do answer them, and if I get enough questions down below, I'll make another video, part two, or I answer some more stuff in more detail. So thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. As always, please subscribe to our channel down below and share this video. We appreciate your support. And so until next time, have a wonderful day from a Text of Opportunity.